Hi again then guys, and welcome to, of course, another installment of the Beards and Cars podcast. I'm recording it early in the day, which is probably why I sound a little bit off, but you can grab it in its audio-only form via the link down below if you so choose on SoundCloud. For the moment, the YouTube version is more beneficial for the channel, but if you want the audio-only, that is there for you. Now, this episode is kind of a tie-in between Beards and Cars as a discussion, and that is what it will predominantly be, but this kind of touches on the news roundup as well, because of course I have not discussed this very significant news. For various reasons, I've been busy over the past couple of days, and I wasn't able to do a dedicated video about this. Plus I thought, you know what, it's a larger discussion. It has more importance than just like a 3 or 4 minute news video, so let's really get into this. I want to do two things in this video, because we're going to be talking about Forza Motorsport, of course, the title of their new game. Now, first of all, I'm going to give my thoughts and maybe some discussion about the title, what that could mean, the general, knowledge area of what we know about the game so far, and then we're going to get into the meat of the discussion, especially down in the comments between myself and you guys and each other, and that is two different things. What do you hope the game will be, and what do you think the game will be? Hopes versus expectations, in other words, because those two things are very different. What you hope a game will be like and what you actually think it will be like are often very different. And if you're honest, certainly if I am, there are lots of times that I've hoped something about a game and it hasn't really turned out to be the case. And that's not necessarily the game's fault. However, that is also dependent on the marketing. Because, of course, if the marketing is misleading, well, then it is the game and the developer and the marketing's fault. So, let's get into this occasion with Forza Motorsport. Now, the title itself is very interesting. Of course, not Forza Motorsport 8, not Forza Horizon 5, and I'm going to call it Forza because, yes, technically it's Forza, but So, Forza Motorsport. Forza Motorsport, even. That's going back to their roots. That was the name of the first game on the original Xbox. That could be a clue in on a certain side of the discussion, because in effect, that, at least as far as the title goes, is similar to what Gran Turismo 7 looks like it's doing with Gran Turismo 4 influences, kind of being an homage to that. At least that's what it looks like from the trailer. Immediate use of the Ford GT, original circuits, of course the home menu is very reminiscent of GT4, even the tuning menu with the way it's broken down into different segments, again, very reminiscent of that, and even Gran Turismo 2 to some degree. Well, I guess actually a lot of the Gran Turismo games in that way, but it's clearly this looking back to the past, in effect. So they could be doing that with this game. The thing that makes me temper that idea is the trailer. And just like Gran Turismo 7 at the time of releasing this video, as far as I know, we only have one trailer to work with. It features the Apollo IE extensively, Laguna Seca as well, and it is a very early trailer. So they haven't finished the game yet, it has no release date. We do know some things about it. I'm not going to get hugely into the tech specs, like frame rates and graphics and sound. All of that stuff is, improved, and they're using that to market it. Of course, that's not really the point of this discussion, though. This is more of an abstract thing, like what is the game going to be like, not what is it going to look like. So, the trailer is interesting, because from a certain point of view, I could fully understand and support the argument saying that, well, the game isn't finished, they don't have a release date, this is kind of like GT7, just a very early show-off of what they're going to do. Maybe even as a response to Gran Turismo 7. It would not actually surprise me at all if this trailer was put together maybe earlier than they'd planned, and I could be wrong here, there may be evidence against this that I'm not aware of, but it wouldn't surprise me if they put this trailer together as kind of a teaser, as a response to GT7, to kind of keep Forza in people's minds more. That would be a smart marketing move, because of course you don't want people thinking, well, I haven't heard anything from Forza in a while, I'll just play GT7, I'll just get a PS5. Well, of course, being exclusives to their consoles, neither of them want that to happen. I mean, Forza's technically on PC as well, but, it's an Xbox game, that's really what it's known for. So of course Microsoft and all of the developers at Turn 10 would want the game to do well on the Xbox, and to do that, people need to buy one. So that wouldn't surprise me. Even irrelevant of that, though, putting out a teaser is always a good idea. So, the choice in that teaser trailer, which is essentially what it is an interesting one. Mostly competition vehicles. The Apollo technically is a road car, but it's about as close to a track car as you can get. Laguna Seca, of course, iconic motorsport circuit. Not an original circuit, you know, there's no Maple Valley in there, there's no King Cobra from Forza 2. So, to me, the vibe that I got from this trailer is actually one that I'm not happy with. And I know that a lot of people have been, well, unhappy with this trailer as well. Certainly on the Discord, a number of people have voiced their dislike for the trailer, myself included. And I think that is completely understandable, because it looks very different. It has elements of a Forza Motorsport game, but it's clearly not a regular game. And we also know that because of what Turn 10 themselves said, that the next game was going to be something a bit different. Now, if I recall correctly, they also not that long ago mentioned something about the game having something of a narrative. A story, in other words. That is interesting, because it's not really something Forza's done before. The Horizon games are about as close as they got to that. But even then, it's just the Horizon Festival. It's a very flimsy story, if you even want to consider it that. It's about as much of a story as Need for Speed Most Wanted had back in the day. You just climb in a ranking system, and the story is just a backbone to that to give you a reason to do it. Likewise with the Horizon Festival, and funnily enough, very similar to what Test Drive Unlimited 2 did before Horizon with the Solar Crown. And of course, the next Test Drive Unlimited game is playing very heavily into that. So, this is a couple of things that make me draw some conclusions, so far at least, about this game. And of course, anything can change. For instance, certain movies get what's called a temp title. It's something which can be changed later on. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Forza is going to suddenly release a new title, but it is possible. This could be a working title, or it could be the actual title. Now, I think it probably is, but the possibility is there that it could change. Now, the thing that this reminds me of is actually a game that a lot of you, especially who are younger, probably haven't played, maybe even haven't heard of, called TOCA Race Driver. And TOCA Race Driver was a game which combined two elements which are similar to this. A story and a pure motorsport experience. Touring cars mostly, other stuff as well. And it had a narrative with actual cutscenes and characters. I think they might be doing that. The reason why that worries me is because it looks an awful lot like GT Sport 2.0, except it happens to have a Forza badge. It looks to me like it could very easily be an extremely pared back, mostly esports focused experience. And if you consider the evidence, that's not exactly too crazy of a claim to make. Consider the title. It's just called Forza Motorsport. There's a reason why they didn't call it 8. Because it's not a usual motorsport game. Motorsport reminds me of the choice of AC Competizione focusing in on Blancpain. Well, if that's the case here as well, we could see something similar. Like TOCA, like the race driver games. Now, this might not happen, but they chose this trailer. They chose to show what they did show in the trailer, and they didn't show much. Few circuits, few features, and just a couple of cars. And most of the cars, as I said, were very clearly more competition focused. There was no JDM car in there that I noticed. There was no, Corolla A86 drifting around a corner. There was no, Fujimi Kaido, canyon race going on like Need for Speed Carbon style. There was a lot less of what you would typically think of as being in a Forza trailer, even a Forza Motorsport trailer, because it's not just the Horizon games that have got a lot of fun in them. The motorsport games do as well, with stuff like the Top Gear coffee break style stuff, the cone challenges. There's plenty of fun stuff in those games as well. It's not just motorsport. So to me, the choice of this title kind of makes me think that they might be honing in on a TOCA race driver style experience. But also, of course, esports is going to be in there. It's almost a dead cert, because that's just the way games are now. I believe that GT7 will have a sport mode as well, much like GT Sport, except in GT7 I suspect that mode will feel essentially like all the best stuff from GT Sport, but without all the needless trimming. So for those who do want to do the esports, they can just go into that game mode and have all the fun they want, and then you've got all the rest of the career mode and everything for the rest of us. The reason why this Forza trailer and why the news around it currently worries me is because, well, to be honest, it worries me for the same reason why GT Sport disappointed me. And why I know it disappointed many of you, because I've been seeing more and more comments over time. And I also find it hilarious how many people will, for instance, jump onto a video where I say anything to criticize GT Sport, even remotely, and immediately jump on the fanboy wagon of saying that, oh, your expectations are wrong, it's a great game, loads of us love it, it's the best-selling GT game, blah, 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 blah. I also think that happens to tie into this. It wouldn't surprise me if executives encouraged the studio to make an esports-focused Forza game because of the sales that GT Sport had. Because at the end of the day, executives don't care about fandom. They might tell you that they do, but please don't buy into that, because it's BS. It really is. All executives care about is the bottom line. They care about what's going to sell. And GT Sport sold many, many copies. Now, the studio, of course, does have more loyalty to the fans. They've made a lot of games and they've tried to improve them every time. Some of us like some more than others, but you can clearly see that the effort was there. And they produce a lot of stuff in a relatively short amount of time. The problem with that is it starts to feel a little bit similar, of course, which is why they were taking a break. Especially with the motorsport titles in particular, 6, 7 and 8, started to feel a little bit more samey, just with a different menu, basically. So, as far as the reason why it worries me to get back into that, the reason why it concerns me is the exact same reason why I was disappointed with GT Sport. Because it was the only option. Now with Forza, I don't think they'll do it quite in the same way, because for those of you who transitioned from Gran Turismo 6 to Sport, as I did, I know many of you did, you will remember, of course, that they shut down the GT6 servers very quickly. And that meant that for those who actually wanted to race against other people, in any form on Gran Turismo, you had no choice. None. It was just Sport. That was it. So if you want to be part of the club, you've got to play this one. And if you want your, old career mode, and let's be honest, GT6 didn't exactly have a great career mode, you can complete it in like a day, well then go back and play that. But this is where it's at, kids. This is where the servers are open. Stay up, keep up with the crowd, blah, blah, blah. Fine. That's great for the esports fans. So, I don't think Forza would do that. I believe that Forza Motorsport, 7 and Forza Horizon 4, is it 4 we're on? Yeah, 4. That they will still stay live. Certainly Horizon 4, because it's such a huge community, they're still putting out tons of content for the game. I foresee the servers staying open for quite some time yet for those two games. Now, by the time this Forza game comes out, that could change, because it does depend on how long it takes. Right now, of course, Horizon and Motorsport will have their, servers open for quite some time. But if the game is 2-3 years away, well, who knows then? So I'm hoping that they don't do what Gran Turismo did, which is make it the only option, because that is when problems occur. See, I strongly believe that if instead of GT Sport, imagine if, and this can't work on the timeline for a number of reasons, including that the console didn't exist, but let's play a what-if game, and you tell me honestly what you think about this. Imagine that GT7 and everything that we've seen was possible on the PS4. Let's just imagine that that was possible, that you didn't need a PS5. Now let's rewind 2 or 3 years, and instead of GT Sport coming out, it's GT7. And let's say that within GT7, part of the game had the same structure, the exact same structure as GT Sport, especially with regard to stuff like livery editing, photo mode, esports with the sport mode stuff, the FIA events. Let's just say that all of that, all of the best stuff about the game, in other words, was a part of GT7. Now, I happen to think it will be, but let's say that that happened 3 years ago. Do you seriously think that anyone would have been complaining about that? Because I don't. I think that everyone would have loved it. I think that that would have sold even more copies than GT Sport did. I believe that more people would be playing it, we'd also have more cars to be working with, we'd probably still be getting better updates at this point because they wouldn't be focusing on GT7 because it would already be out, and of course all of the esports stuff would still be happening because it's a part of the game. Basically like a super evolved version of the Nismo Academy, but more efficient, wider in scope, and just a better version of that same concept, essentially, making real race drivers. At least those who want to be. Maybe some of the guys just want to do esports and don't actually want to become a real driver, but I should think that's pretty rare. Well, basically what I just said eliminates the GT Sport problem, because GT Sport never existed, and crucially, all of the best stuff about GT Sport would have been, and this is the key word, an option. Because that is what players want. They want choice. Choice is such an important thing, even if it's an illusion. It's an important illusion because people like to think that they're in control, and they like to make choices, especially as a consumer. And if GT Sport Mode was a part of GT7 instead of its separate game, I guarantee I wouldn't be complaining at all about Sport Mode, because it would just be a part of the game. It wouldn't be the game. Likewise with Tourist Trophy. Imagine when Tourist Trophy came out, which for those of you who don't know is the motorcycle game from Polyphony. Imagine if Polyphony said, we're doing something different. It's a motorbike game, and we're putting Gran Turismo on hiatus. Imagine the response that would have been had. Now, some people would have played it, but a lot of people wouldn't. And a lot of people would be saying things like, well, I'm never playing Gran Turismo again. I'm not buying their next game. I'm not a fan anymore, if this is the way they treat their fandom. Do those comments sound familiar? I wonder why. Maybe because GT Sport did just that. It was the only option. It wasn't a choice, it was this or nothing. Sure, you can play the older games, but you won't be part of the club. You'll be a relic. Kaz himself said he never plays the older games, never even gave him a second thought until some of those esports guys were playing it, and he noticed that, hey, people actually do like looking to the past. And it looks, from the trailer for GT7, like it did him all the better. So, good job. But the main concern that I have for Forza Motorsport, if it ends up being called that, has nothing to do with whether or not it's an esports game. I have no fundamental problem with a GT Sport. As I just said, if it was a choice, not when it's the only option. So if Forza Motorsport becomes the only choice, that is when I'm going to have an issue with it. And I will tell you right now, if I had known that GT Sport was going to be what it was, well, let's be honest, I'd have probably still bought it because of YouTube content. But if Forza Motorsport turns out to be what I think it is going to be, an ACC or GT Sport style game, I'll tell you right now, I'm not buying an Xbox, and I'm not buying the Forza game, because I'm not wasting hundreds of pounds on a lesser game, a game that focuses on something that I have zero interest in, and I don't care how many views can be had from it. So that flies in the face of all of those people who like to say that everything I do is trying to be clickbait. You can go and stuff it, because clearly not. I would not play that game, because it's not what I want from Forza. And I believe that if it does turn out to be that kind of game, I won't be the only one feeling that way. Now, of course, in this discussion so far, I haven't really talked much about what I hope the game will be. I've actually tried to stick more to the kind of realistic side of what I actually think it will be, rather than what I hope. So I'm going to leave that mostly to you guys. What do you hope Forza Motorsport is and will be? But what do you think it actually will be? What, in other words, is your concern about it? If, for instance, you didn't like the trailer, articulate why. And then we can have some discussions down below. As far as my hopes go, well, it might surprise you actually what my hopes would be for this game, because I actually hope, based on what I've seen, because it has to be tempered with facts, I hope that it is something that's purely focused in on motorsport for an esports crowd. That might surprise you, because it seems like I just said the opposite. But no, the crucial difference is whether or not this becomes the only option. That is the only thing that matters to me. If this becomes the Forza game, and the previous stuff all gets shut down or limited in scope, that's when I'm going to have an issue. I have no problem with catering to esports fans whatsoever. As I said, Make GT Sport Mode a part of GT7. I have no problem with that at all. I'm sure I'll even use it occasionally, as I did with GT Sport. The problem comes when, and I think this is actually probably the more justice and injustice and kind of the dislike of betrayal aspect of my personality that really comes into play, where I despise companies, brands, individuals who forget how they got where they are. You know, this channel, for instance, take it as a minute example. I've had so many people say to me, why are you doing car reviews and game reviews on the same channel? I've already been hurt from a business point of view by doing that. I've had the opportunity to drive supercars on the channel already, but when the people who saw what the channel was saw that there was gaming involved as well, they weren't interested. Well, that's their loss, because that's the whole point. There are loads of channels doing gaming. There are loads of channels doing cars. There are very few doing both. And I pride myself on that, and it's not something that's going to change. And the reason why I brought that up has nothing to do with supercars. It's the point that I'm making about not forgetting where you came from. I still put out GT6 videos. That's where I started, because I don't leave people who helped me behind. And that, to me, is something which businesses could learn from. Is it the smartest and most efficient business move? Well, logic would tell you no, but I would push back on that. Because you know what? There are two ways of doing business, and I believe I've mentioned this before. Option number one is you take the executive route. You go for the GT Sport sales numbers. Now, GT Sport sold a lot of copies. Do you seriously think that GT Sport 2 would sell that many? Because I don't. So it's a very short-term gratification kind of business move. You make a lot of money now, but you'll make less in future. That depends. You could do that if you want to. It's a get-rich-quick kind of developing. Or you could use my method. My method takes a little bit longer. Except, with my method, producing new games, new content on the channel, covering multiple audiences more and more over time, we started just with GT6, then Forza, Test Drive Unlimited, Project Gotham, Project Cars, real car reviews, product reviews, motorcycles, all of the other stuff, a podcast, a livery competition, a photo mode competition, a worldwide community spotlight. What's the result of these things? Multiple audiences coming together under one roof. And of course, this isn't a six-figure channel. Not yet. So of course those numbers aren't exactly as big as they could be. But the point is, it appeals to so many different groups of people. Drifting, drag racing, circuit, rally, all of these are pockets of fandom, and there is some crossover, but people are very divided now. Now that method has done me very well. It's got me to exactly where I am now, and the channel is bigger every day than it ever has been before. And I always find it hilarious when people say that, oh, your videos get like 1,000 views on average, you know, for a 62k channel almost. That sounds pathetic. Well, a lot of that is thanks to YouTube, not thanks to the content, and that is the most frustrating part for me, because YouTube admits in their own analytics that only 10% of the people on this channel actually get shown my videos. That means that out of 60,000 people, only 6,000 actually get shown it. And then out of those 6,000, how many are going to be interested in every single thing? Well, by definition, not all of them. So of course my views are going to be far lower than they should be, because YouTube is a pretty broken system right now, and a lot of that is thanks to, of course, the notification bell. I believe the worst thing they've ever done on the platform. But that's for another discussion at another time. Again, the point that I'm making is, when I start these fandoms, with almost no exception, I don't leave them behind. There are some series that I've done, you know, like an opening episode of, and thought, well, I'll get back to it at some point. I've very rarely, in fact, I can't think of a single time, cancelled a series completely, purely because it, you know, wasn't doing well enough in the views. I've never done that, as far as I can think of. The reason why I haven't gone back to a lot of them is actually really simple, and it's got nothing to do with business. I'm just a procrastinator. And that might seem ironic considering the sheer volume of videos that I put out, but in some ways I am a procrastinator, especially when it comes to a game that I might not be as passionate about. Maybe my passion is short-lived. And one of the best ways to kill passion is when other people don't enjoy an idea as much as you do. You know, you put all this time into making a video. For me, the most recent example was Game vs. Real. I adore that series. I love making it. It's such a cool idea to me. People don't watch it, though. You know, some do, but most don't really care. That was disappointing to me. Now, I still do them, but now my measures or my expectations are more measured. I know that it's not going to do that well, which is a shame, because the stuff that tends to do the best on the channel, somewhat ironically, flies in the face of the fans, or the haters, I should say. Because haters will often accuse me of only making videos that are, you know, the most clickbaity, that will bring in the most views. Well, look across the channel for more than 30 seconds and you'll immediately see that that's clearly not the case. I have an entire series called Unsung Heroes. It's one of the worst viewed series I've ever done, because by definition it's about cars that people don't know about. So it's not exactly highly clickable stuff. Then on the other hand, my most successful videos ever tend to be stuff like money methods, or like really in-depth, big, overarching tutorials about stuff like the livery editor. If I was really bothered about only getting crazy views, I would exclusively make that content. So don't give me that you're interested in views and you only make clickbait BS, because that's exactly what it is. To get to the point again, though, because these are all kind of tied in together to the main point, that is something which I think too few studios seem to do. They jump on whatever bandwagon is currently good. And at the moment, that happens to be esports. They jump on the bandwagon, earn all the cash, but then they seem to be very short-sighted in thinking, well, actually, what about all these fans who don't give a rat's ass about esports? GT Sport is a perfect example. Look how many of us don't care. Look how few people play GT Sport now that they've seen GT7. I see comments so many times on the Discord server, in messages, in comments, of people saying, you know what, I haven't played GT Sport in months. GT7 is the most excited I've been in a long time. These are actual people, not just me making stuff up. So it's clearly not just me that feels that way. And I think that studios often forget that. And that is the second way of doing business, the way that I try to do business. Constantly build your audience and appeal to more and more people in a wider and wider sphere all the time. But, and this is the crucial thing that Turn 10 might be doing, I hope they're not, Polyphony certainly did with GT Sport, and that is leaving the people who made you behind for the sake of bringing in the new people. That is such a profoundly stupid business decision, because it is short-term. Businesses are not short-term. You need to create a legacy that will last and build all the time. So yes, my channel takes a while. Think of it as a business rather than a channel. Yes, the business takes a little bit longer, but look how many of you have been here from years ago. And why are you still here? Because you are still catered to. You have new stuff to watch, new topics, new games, new interests, but the stuff which you came here for is still done. Polyphony unarguably dropped the ball on that with GT Sport. There is no opposing argument to that. You can easily shoot down that argument from multiple angles. I hope that Turn 10 isn't doing the same. Now, this discussion, at least from my point of view, ended up being longer than I probably planned it to be, but I think that it all does tie in, because expectations from a business perspective as a creator myself are different to just, a game player, which I would have been, for instance, before the channel. So tell me your thoughts. What do you hope that the game is? What do you realistically think the game will be? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell me down below. And of course, have some discussions. Try to be civil. I know that's a lot to ask on YouTube. But until next time, I'll see you then. And of course, for now, as always, thanks for watching.